Imagine walking down a dark corridor. At the end, something moves, but it doesn't run, it doesn't scream, it doesn't attack. It merely watches, motionless, unperturbed, a silence heavier than 1,000 shouts. You don't know why, but you feel that you are standing before something wrong, profoundly wrong. What makes that fear so intense if nothing has happened yet? Throughout history, we have tried to give evil a face. We have painted demons with horns, filmed grotesque creatures, and summoned flaming entities. But what if true terror has no form? What if the most terrifying monster does not roar, does not bleed, does not howl, but simply exists in silence, like an inevitable logic creeping behind everything? In this video, we will explore the essence of evil and of fear, stripping bare that which haunts us not by screams, but by silence. We will analyze how art, literature, and games have taught us to fear what is cold, calculating, and invisible. We will see why certain villains, such as the Lich from Adventure Time, Gaunter O'Dim from The Witcher, or the Strange Man in the Polish film Diabeł, are so unsettling, not because of their brute strength, but because they embody absolute evil without needing to raise their voice. Prepare for a descent into the coldest corners of fear, those places where cruelty does not revel, it simply happens, where terror is so pure that it does not even need to be explained. What you are about to see may have no horns and no claws, but it will haunt your thoughts long after the video has ended. To understand the most terrifying monster we can imagine, we must first dissect what evil is. Not in terms of appearance, but of essence. The deepest evil rarely screams. It whispers. It does not invade. It infiltrates. While visual tradition, from medieval frescoes to Hollywood blockbusters, painted demons with bat wings and flaming eyes, the true essence of evil lay less in form and more in intention. Evil, in its rawest form, is the union between a cold intention and a relentless execution. It is the pleasure of causing suffering, not by impulse, but by conscious decision. Consider the demon in Night on Bald Mountain from Disney's Fantasia, 1940. The being who rules the mountain does not merely command dancing souls in an orgy of torment, he revels in it. The expression on his face is not rage, but delight. And that is what terrifies most. It is not the destructive fury, but the calm sadism, the joy in chaos, the certainty in malice. Media has always tried to represent evil within human bodies, grotesque transformations, bloodshot eyes. Yet when we observe the real emotional impact of these images, we realize that what wounds us is not what we see, but what we feel lies behind the image. A monstrous figure that screams may shock us, but a figure that merely watches, motionless, while the world burns, that truly torments us. For true malice does not need to justify itself. It simply is. This conception of evil is also reflected in classic texts. In the Divine Comedy, Dante reserves the center of hell not for fire, but for ice. Lucifer is trapped in a frozen lake, immobilized yet not defeated. He beats his wings and creates the icy currents that keep hell in its eternal state. There are no screams there, only the total absence of warmth, of emotion, of life. Evil, ultimately, is the denial of all that pulsates. Over the centuries, this image was refined. In the Renaissance, paintings began to portray the devil, not as a flaming monster, but as an elegant man with serene, even beautiful features. He does not need claws, he has arguments. He does not need to torture, he persuades. Malice migrated from the physical to the moral, and that made it even more dangerous. Modern pop culture grasped this shift. The devil in The Devil's Advocate is a well-dressed, erudite, eloquent man who manipulates with words, not with screams. In The Witcher 3, Gaunter O'Dim does not need to raise his voice to be terrifying. He merely proposes contracts. He fulfills the bargain. He smiles. Always smiles, and this brings us to the idea of evil as structure. A form of evil that depends not on explosions or spells, but functions like an inevitable mechanism, a clockwork of perfect gears where each cruel act was already foreseen. It is the evil that hides in systems, in pacts, in rules. The evil that, like a well-lubricated machine, keeps ticking even when no one is watching. Like the strange man in Diablo, who does not kill directly, but catalyzes destruction wherever he goes, merely whispering, merely observing, merely existing. This is the heart of the problem of evil. It does not need to look evil. It may come disguised as reason, as contract, as logic, even as justice. And because of that, it is so difficult to identify before it is too late. The most terrifying monster is not deformed. He may be well-dressed. He may speak softly. He may smile as he signs your sentence. Because true evil does not need spectacle. It only needs to exist, cold, calculating, inevitable. If evil can be calculated, fear cannot. Fear is a primal reaction, preceding language, logic, moral judgment. We feel fear before we know why. It manifests as a shiver, a catch in the breath, the heart hammering against the ribs. It is an internal voice that does not argue, only warns something is wrong. That is why the most terrifying monster does not need to scream, show teeth, or raise a hand. It only needs to be perceived. Here lies the second pillar of our journey, understanding that fear is not necessarily linked to visible cruelty. Many characters commit monstrous acts, but they do not haunt us. What truly affects us is the way evil presents itself, or rather, how it hides. And it is this ghostly quality, this emotional displacement, that separates the ordinary villain from absolute terror. Let us take as a starting point two villains from the world of Adventure Time: Hudson Abadir and the Lich. Hudson is the king of the Nightosphere, a dimension of grotesque torments where others' suffering is a spectacle. He is visually demonic, extravagant, sadistic, but his evil, though loud, is almost comical. He enjoys doing evil, and that paradoxically makes him somewhat comprehensible. By contrast, the Lich does not desire to dominate, punish, or laugh. He wants to erase. His existence is a silent, absolute mission of destruction. His coldness unsettles us, for it is devoid of vanity, of passion, of any trait that might allow us to understand him. He does not hate life. He simply sees no reason for it to exist. This kind of impersonal, ice-cold villain who acts like a corrupted force of nature is what frightens most. For he approaches what we call existential terror. The fear that the universe, in its essence, is not only indifferent, but perhaps hostile, and that evil may be but a reflection of that absence of meaning. George R.R. Martin explores this with the White Walkers in A Song of Ice and Fire. While humans massacre each other for power, the others march in silence as a memory of the ancient world. They do not speak. They do not scream. They do not laugh. They are pure ice and purpose. Their terror does not come from brutality, but from absolute silence. They are the antithesis of life, and therefore its inevitable end. This concept also manifests in The Witcher, with Gaunter O'Dim, a being who does not brandish weapons but rewrites destinies. He arrives like a dealer of words and leaves as a god of chaos in disguise. He is omnipresent without fanfare, cruel without rage, manipulative without haste. He is terrifying because you realize too late that you were dealing with something far greater than you ever imagined. The same applies to the strange man in Red Dead Redemption. An ostensibly ordinary man without visible powers who merely appears, asks questions and vanishes. But his presence carries a metaphysical weight. He does not threaten, he observes. He knows more than he should, and he cannot be killed. Terror arises from inevitability, from the realization that he exists outside the rules of the world. It is not destructive power that frightens, but the sense that he sees everything and acts with unfathomable purposes. This characteristic, the terror of that which we cannot understand or evade, reaches its apogee in characters like the strange man in the Polish film Diabeł. He is frail, silent, almost invisible. Yet, like a poison, he contaminates everything around him. Every word he utters is a needle, every gesture a trap. And when we finally understand who he is, we are already too far gone to escape. The horror in this case is not an event. It is a process, a slow poisoning of reality. That is why figures, like Vaatu in Legend of Korra, although they represent cosmic evil, do not frighten in the same way. Because they are too grand, too abstract, too removed from human experience. Fear needs proximity. It needs to feel possible. When evil becomes too mythological, we cease to fear it and merely admire it as a symbol. Vaatu represents absolute chaos, yet he is so cosmic that he cannot fit in the frame of our mind. Terror, on the other hand, can fit into a shadow in the corner of a room, in a half-whispered sentence, in a gaze that lingers 1 second longer than it should. The fear that truly strikes us is that which we cannot explain. That is why ice-cold monsters, impassive ones who do not feed on our pain but simply ignore it, freeze us in our tracks. Because you cannot negotiate with them, you cannot hate them, there is no passion in them, and it is that absence that tears us apart from within. Unlike anger, hatred, or violence, fear is born in a void, in the gap between the known and the unknown. And it is there that the most terrifying monster hides, on the edge of comprehension, where our senses fail and our minds recoil. The deepest fear is not that of dying in a scream, but of realizing in silence that something ancient, something very cold and very patient, has been watching us for a long time. Having explored evil as intention and fear as reaction, it is time to synthesize these elements in the figure that gives shape to true terror. Not the theatrical terror of splattered blood and hysterical screams, but that which settles in slowly, silently, and never leaves. This monster has no claws. It has purpose. It has no flaming eyes. It has patience. It does not chase us through the shadows. It awaits us in them. The anatomy of the most terrifying monster begins with absence. Absence of emotion. Absence of noise. Absence of comprehensible logic. It is a negative presence, like extreme cold that cannot be seen but consumes. Like the vacuum of space where there is no sound, no air, no rescue. Everything about it is control. Evil in its purest form is devoid of distractions. It does not take pleasure in suffering. Such a feeling would still imply emotion. What drives it is something far worse. Emptiness. A desire without desire, a function executed with indifferent precision. That is why figures like the Lich or the Strange Man are more terrifying than any medieval demon, because in them there is no hatred, only function. They are cogs in a cosmic mechanism that sees no value in life. And how do you fight something that does not hate you? How do you beg mercy from something that has no vanity, no ego, no hurry? Its appearance is rarely monstrous. Sometimes it is almost banal. A well-pressed suit, a common face, a contained smile. This banality of evil, coined by Hannah Arendt, forms a crucial part of its shape. The most terrifying monster does not need a body, but a position in the world. It can be a person, an entity, a contract, a system. It can be anything that escapes our comprehension and precisely for that reason dominates us. Its language is not that of screams, but of contracts, of rules, of agreements sealed with a pen rather than a blade. It does not need to raise a hand, it merely signs, and fate is already sealed. Like Gaunter O'Dim, who offers what we most desire and exacts from us what we never knew we could lose. And the cruelest part, it makes us complicit. Its terror does not come from direct violence, but from manipulation, from a subtle game in which, without realizing it, we hand ourselves over. When we become aware, we are already compromised. It has already rewritten us. This makes its threat all the more perverse. For we are not only victims, we are part of the equation. Another essential trait is imperturbability. The most terrifying. Monster never loses control. It may be surrounded by chaos, but its presence remains constant, solid, unchanging. There is no hysteria, no haste. And that wounds us because it confronts us with our fragility. It is the rock in the center of the hurricane. We are the dust swirling around it. This characteristic also evokes ice, a recurring symbol of absolute evil. While fire is explosive, impulsive, ice is patient. Ice does not consume quickly. It preserves. It holds the world's corpse. And in doing so, it turns everything to stone. That is why in Dante's Inferno, the core of suffering is not heat, but eternal freezing. Lucifer does not scream. He stands frozen to the waist, motionless, chewing the souls of traitors, in an eternal banquet without emotion. The image of evil that watches without acting, that calculates without hesitation, that does not need to touch to wound, is the archetype of this ideal monster. It is an inverted mirror of God, omnipresent, but without compassion, omniscient, but without mercy, omnipotent, but without a soul. It is not the Antichrist, it is the anti-meaning. It does not come to destroy, but to erase, to silence, to annul. And its greatest power may be doubt, for it operates on the threshold of perception. Is it there? Has it really acted? It plants uncertainty and nourishes it with small coincidences, calculated silences, gestures that only make sense afterwards. And when fear finally takes shape, it is already too late. It is inside, not outside. Therefore, this monster is not something you see. It is something you feel. A growing discomfort. A premonition that we cannot name. It manifests as that which shatters our trust in the world. That which whispers that deep down we are alone, and that the order of things can be inverted at any moment. It is more than a creature. It is a presence, a principle, a sentence already written, and its greatest weapon is not attack, but waiting. It does not run. It knows that sooner or later, everything will come to it. Ultimately, the most terrifying monster we can imagine does not hide in the shadows. It is the shadow itself. It does not roar, it does not wound, it does not run. It merely exists. And by existing as it does, cold, logical, subtle, it dismantles our most instinctive defenses. It is the reflection of our darkest fears, that evil can be rational, that fear can arrive unannounced, and that true danger is not what screams, but what falls silent. This kind of terror does not need special effects. It builds itself in silence, in doubt, in waiting. In every work we have explored, from Dante to Diablo, from Game of Thrones to Adventure Time, the most terrifying evil was not the loudest, but the coldest, the most patient, the one that does not justify itself, the one that does not hesitate. And perhaps this is the most unsettling lesson. Horror is not a force that attacks us from without, but something that corrodes us from within. Something that manifests when we lose control, when we no longer know whom to trust, when reality seems to warp around a void we cannot fill. The most terrible monster is that which shatters our trust in the world. It does not wish to punish us. It does not wish to dominate us. It only wants us to disappear, and it will remain there, motionless when everything is over. So the next time you feel a shiver for no reason, a chill while everything seems normal, perhaps it is him, the faceless monster watching in silence until our next descent into the shadows of history.